All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar event. It's about 1 minute till 3 on my computer, but on other devices it shows that it's promptly 3 p.m. Eastern Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. We're here today to talk about recording or setting up fixed assets in Church Windows accounting. My name is Josh, and I'm going to be your presenter. I'm a support technician for Church Windows. I may have worked with some of you on support calls. We're going to work together for about the next 20 minutes or so to 3 p.m., 3:20 Eastern Time today. If you have a question, please type it into the questions portion or pane of the webinar. This is just it. We keep everyone muted because the background noise would be just awful if I were not to have folks muted on there and everybody was able to talk. It would be awful. So again, I'm happy to answer your questions when I can get to them, of course. I will try my best to keep an eye on those throughout the webinar event, but it is just me today. So, if I do see a question, I'll try to repeat it. I will repeat it for everyone's benefit, and then we'll see what we can't do to answer that. However, it may be that I'm unable to get to the answering the questions until the end. I will, of course, be happy to stick around after the 20 minutes or after the webinar is over and answer questions if you have them. I simply do ask that you do keep them, on our topic today, recording fixed assets, what have you. I'm not equipped or not prepared to answer those other questions, and my database may not support it for us. So, all right, let's go ahead and let's get started on this. So first of all, the current version of Church Windows is 18.15.2. Many of you may have just received your 18.15.2 CD in the mail today, last week. Maybe you haven't, but you will soon. So we're going to be working on 18.15.2 today. If you have any questions or problems with that installation, or update, please give us a holler. We're happy to talk about it with you or help work through it. It is the main reason why we're a little backed up in support today, honestly. We're just having some issues with users having problems with the install. But please be patient. We'll get back to you. Recording fixed assets, of course, is going to be set up in our accounting module. So I think that the first thing that we need to discuss, and again, I have to kind of take a step back and talk about it from the most simplistic possible viewpoint, not assuming that everybody knows what those fixed assets are or what they represent, why we might need to record them on our chart of accounts and subsequently on our balance sheet. But, fixed assets, I guess the closest way I can equate to it on something like what you might see as on a traditional balance sheet might be considered plant assets. Basically, they're physical assets that the church owns. Any land, building, furniture, equipment, anything that the church considers can put a dollar value on that doesn't represent actual physical cash. Something that isn't going to be deposited to one of our existing bank accounts, like a checking account or a savings or something here. Okay, so we see clearly under our chart of accounts here that we've got those cash accounts, checking account, petty cash, money market, fifth third savings, CDs, accounts receivable doesn't always represent physical cash until we receive money from a particular client, and investments. Okay, those all can be liquidated very quickly. Fixed assets, not so much. But there are times when sometimes we need to or want to record the value of the church, appraised value of its building, grounds, contents, what have you, on our balance sheet. A common example of where those are often needed or desired on the treasurer's or on the balance sheet itself is when, say, a church goes to take out a loan at the bank. A bank will oftentimes want to see what the a value of the church, the building, etc., is, the land it sits on, etc., and so they'll ask you to add those to your balance sheet. Okay, those subsequently will also then need to be reflected changes in value of those. Whether the value of that property goes up or down, we'll need to periodically record changes to those. However, we do need to get those accounts and the subsequent value onto our books and onto our balance sheet, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So because we're dealing with a fund accounting system, we have to add these monies, these values of our land, buildings, grounds, fixed assets, basically, to both sides of our balance sheet. I can't just add it to the asset side. We also have to add it to our fund side. So we're going to add both a fund or funds and assets in order to be able to add this fixed asset totals to our balance sheet equally. That's a really important thing to understand about Church Windows accounting is, as a fund accounting system, I can't just put a balance or a value into the asset side of my balance sheet without also adding it to somewhere into my liabilities or my funds. That would attempt to try to create an imbalance on our balance sheet, and the system simply won't permit that. Okay, so we have to add these fixed asset totals to both our asset side and our fund balance and liability side, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, so there are a couple different ways to do that. We can go here on our chart of accounts, and we can, I'm going to get rid of my drawing here, bear with me. So I can say click on my assets here, go to my tree view. I can right click over my assets, and notice here it says add new asset. So with this, we're going to show you how to do that here. So we're going to add a new asset. It opens up a window that says add asset, add new asset account, and we're going to call this land, and let's make an ampersand on that, and buildings. Tab down, and it's asking us to enter an account number that starts with the number 1. I've kind of done some preparation for this in advance, folks. So clearly, after our 1.30 investment asset, we're going to number this one like 150, 110, and we'll add it to. Yeah, there's our fixed asset subtotal. So we've added a subtotal for that already, and we're simply going to click OK. Okay, and then we're going to add another asset. We're going to right click and choose add a new asset account, and we're going to call this one furniture and equipment. And folks, you can make these, this breakdown of these assets, fixed asset accounts, as detailed as you want. If the church owns, numerous pieces of property, and you want to see a good deal of delineation in these fixed assets, by all means, you can continue to set up, separate accounts for whatever value you want to see separated on your balance sheet. Okay, so I've added the two, land and buildings and furniture and equipment, and I'll come back to adding or getting the value of those particular accounts added in here in just a moment. But again, we've got to add a fund too. So as we've clearly seen, we can add accounts to our chart of accounts by going into, in this case, manage accounts and view, or in our chart of accounts window in the center here, choosing the particular type, going to our tree view, right click over the type of an account and choosing add. Okay, I could do the same thing for my funds too. Okay, so I could choose add new fund and add my fixed asset fund. But the other way to do that, of course, is by going up to manage accounts in the top left, below that accounts plus minus, and we'll choose fund here. Okay, so here it's just basically adding us to enter a new fund, and we're just going to simply call this fixed asset fund, and then tab down and call it fixed asset fund balance. Okay, so again, when I'm looking down at my current list of funds, I can't make it 350.100 because I've got an already existing fund for them. There's no direct correlation or tie to these assets in these funds, so I can make it a completely different number, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to leave it as that being added to my total fund balances. Simply click Add Account. Okay. So we've added the necessary accounts. Okay. This is probably one of the most important things to take away from this particular webinar session is we're not going to add an income or an expense account for this fixed asset fund. Notice when I go down to my list of existing funds here, fixed asset fund has no sub-funds. It's not going to. Unlike these others, until I put a balance into this account, I am able to delete the account, and I could certainly add sub-funds if I wish. Okay, So within my fixed asset fund balance, I certainly could go ahead and add sub-funds called, land and building fund and my furniture and equipment fund. It's really up to you. There's a good deal of flexibility in the system. Personally, based on my separation that is already existing at the top side of my balance sheet, I don't think that setting up sub-funds for my fixed asset fund are necessary. All I have to do is run my balance sheet, look at those asset accounts at the top, and that clearly tells me how much is allocated or is estimated or approximated for those particular fixed assets. I could set up corresponding funds if I wish. I just don't think it's necessary. Okay. So we've added those accounts. Okay, so they're there. So now the question is, how do we get the balances into these accounts? Very straightforward. No income, no expenses. These are monies that will not appear ever on our treasurer's report as part of the church's annual profit and loss. I mean, in terms of their base value. In fact, I don't think any gains or losses in those we'd want to appear on our treasurer's report, again, since they don't represent physical cash, real cash. So we're going to go up to transactions in the top left, across the top center to other, and from our drop-down menu under other, we're going to choose simply a journal entry transaction. So I've entered these and added these new accounts in our accounting year for January through December 2016. And so what we're going to do is we're going to backdate this back to January 1. Technically, I can make it any date I want. Okay? So here, we're going to choose land and buildings. We're going to debit that amount in order to add the amount to the account. So we're going to say that the land and buildings is approximately valued at $1.2 million. Tab over. I'm going to choose my furniture and equipment. We're going to say that's estimate value is at $300,000. Now when I tab over, we notice here in the middle of my journal entry window, we've got our debit column that shows $1.5 million in there. We have to get our credit column to match that amount. Okay, so when we choose our fixed asset fund, logic says without only that one fund representing our fixed asset total, we're going to just naturally put a total of $1,500,000 into our fixed asset fund. Now notice that when we click, our tab over, and it does total those debits and credits are equal, and we can now post this transaction if we wish. Okay? Journal entry always requires balanced debits and credits. Every transaction does, but journal entries particularly require that, we have to. If I were to make that a total different, making this 1.4 million or something, and tab over, and if I try to click on add to batch, notice it's barking at me. The red dot's flashing and next to the total saying, if I hover over that, it says debits and credits must equal. So I need to revisit my equation here. So I'll correct that back to 1.5 million. Done, add to batch, and post. I'm not going to print the transaction, but now when I go to my, say, reports and balance sheet, I'll run it as of February 2016. Technically, I could run it for any date of the year, just it won't show in my beginning balances. But we now clearly see we've got our land and building and furniture and equipment asset with $1.5 million. Now when we scroll down to our funds, we see our fixed asset fund with $1.5 million in it. Okay? So that's how we get those fixed asset totals on there. The one addition to this event, this webinar event that I'm going to talk about here, that we've got about 5 minutes left, is an easy way to think about the fixed assets is they are, in essence, their own little mini balance sheet. Okay? So whatever the total of my fixed assets are that I add at the top, my fund or funds that I set up for my fixed asset must have the same total in there. Again, it will not permit us to have an unbalanced balance sheet. Okay, and why this is important is, let's say the church wants to go to the bank and take out a loan. Okay, they need to borrow some money. Well, the fixed assets is a natural place to take that money from to move it over to your liabilities, if you want to show the principal balance of your loan on your balance sheet as an outstanding liability. Many churches or most will. So same as we had done before with our journal entry to put the monies into these funds, I would need to add, say, go back into my manage accounts, accounts plus minus. We're going to choose liability, and we're going to call this loan payable, and we're going to call this one, number this one like 290, 100. Long-term liabilities, we'll add that there, and we'll click add account. So same thing, I don't have a balance in that account. So let's say the church now has borrowed, $400,000 for something, for whatever purpose. So we would similarly go to transactions, other, go right back to my journal entry transaction. Let's say we're borrowing that money as of, February or March 31st. I'm going to post a debit to my fixed asset account, my fund. Then I'm going to choose my loan payable, put the same 400,000 into the credit column, click done, add to batch, and again post. Sure, when I received that 400,000 from the bank, I would just again post a either a journal entry to credit my general fund or wherever, my capital improvement fund, or wherever I was wanting to put that 400,000, and make a debit to the bank to record the deposit. But this now, when I go back and revisit my balance sheet, now shows that I have I still have my 1.5 million in there that, if that's what we could expect for sale of proceeds if we were to sell the church building and grounds and contents tomorrow. But I also now show under my loan payable, whoops, I dated that in March, didn't I? So I have to date that, just change this to March, my fault. So here now we got the 1.5 million, but we now show that I have $400,000 in long-term liabilities in the form of a loan, and my fixed asset fund balance account down here shows that $400,000 is no longer there I no longer have that equity. We no longer own that equity in there. So again, that loan would have to be repaid. As my loan liability goes down and I credit the money back over to my fixed asset fund balance to go back up, when the loan is repaid, the fixed asset fund balance would be back to the 1.5 million. So I've repaid the loan in its entirety, and I no longer owe that money. So the fixed assets are really effective accounts for not only for recording, what our value is of the church, of its physical assets that are not cash accounts, but also effective accounts to use naturally when we're trying to be able to record a loan in the system and be able to show that outstanding loan principal balance on our balance sheet. So, but that's it, folks. That's where we are. It's about 19 minutes after the hour or so, or 19 minutes into the event. If you've seen what you came to see, please, you can choose the exit leave webinar option under file. This event will eventually be posted on our blog page at our website, a recording of this, so you will be able to watch it again, but I hope it's been helpful. If you have to leave, thank you so much for attending, and we hope to see you at another Church Windows webinar event. Otherwise, I'll be sticking around and seeing if there are some questions that folks are going to type into me here. I'm not seeing anything popping in just yet. But I'll give folks a few more seconds to type something in. I know that sometimes those questions are lengthy. Looks like folks are darting out or diving out pretty quick here. Diane's asking, I didn't hear you say how we determine the value of the fixed assets. That's a good question, Diane. Honestly, that's something that you'll have to that you'll have to determine, that you'll have to go find out from your board or something. Maybe if you've got a mortgage or something that the bank has an last appraised value of that. Otherwise, generally that occurs through something like a legitimate appraisal. But yeah, that we'll have to ask that. You'll have to ask that of somebody at the church there where to get that. Generally, again, you can go to the bank or to a professional appraisal company, and they'll come out and do that for you. There would be an expense involved with it, or the church can simply put in an assessment on it if they wish, an estimated value. Bob's asking, what do we do with depreciation, accumulated depreciation? Well, in most cases, Bob, that you can determine how that's to be recorded. You certainly could. Again, when there's a change in value, you could go right back into your transactions, journal entry, again, and record an adjustment to those fixed asset totals on both your funds and your assets if you wish. But on most balance sheets for churches that I see and work with, they don't track accumulated depreciation or depreciation. They just go in and make the adjustments to these fixed asset accounts to show that it's worth less. You certainly may. We're not dealing with a for-profit balance sheet here, so that's in most cases why the churches don't need to record those. But you certainly may. You would have to set up an asset account, probably called accumulated depreciation or appreciation depreciation, and record the appropriate adjustments there, to those accounts. Good questions. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, folks. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Again, we hope the event's been helpful. Look for the recording at some point on our blog page at the website or a link to our YouTube page. And again, please check the current list of user group webinar events out on our website, and we hope to see you at another event. Oh, okay, thanks. When I joined the staff at our church, they made a big deal of the depreciation, accumulated depreciation each year, which I suggested to them it was a waste of time. Well, yeah, Bob, I'm in support of you on that in most cases, again, churches simply don't have to record those as a nonprofit organization, do not have to record those accumulated appreciation, depreciation values. Again, if they want you to record that, they have to tell you how they want it to be set up. That's my simple response on that. The folks who really want to do that, they want to, they've got to tell you what they want to see. It's my pleasure, of course, Bob. And all right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar for everybody. And if you have any more questions or problems, or questions or problems about, your church windows, please call our technical support staff. We're happy to help. All right. Thank you all so much. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.